Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Jacob. I'm the president of Citizens in Charge and Citizens in Charge Foundation, two organizations whose goal is to protect the petition process, specifically for initiative and referendum. But that same petition process, of course, is used for both ballot measures and for candidates seeking to get their names on the ballot. It is a basic staple of American democracy, and for that reason, it deserves to be protected. Now, the report I am releasing today looks into the prosecution, which of course the trial is a couple weeks away, but the prosecution of Dr. Annette Bosworth, who was a candidate for the U.S. Senate in the Republican primary here in South Dakota last year. In looking at this prosecution, there were several things that we wanted to address and look a little deeper into. First is the penalty that is possible with these sorts of charges. The second is the nature of what happened, and obviously we don't have all the facts in. That's why you have a trial, but I think many of the facts in this case have been agreed upon, and that we can look at those. And then I also want to look at, and do look at in this report, what's happened around the country and how this particular case might compare with those. First of all, it should be noted that this prosecution, from all the research I've done and people I've talked to, is the most severe penalty that I'm aware of ever being faced by anyone involved in the petition process. I'm talking about in every state of the country, and I'm talking about for the last 100 years or so. I'm not aware of any prosecution in which a person involved in the petition process faced this sort of penalty. And again, that penalty is 12 counts. If she's found guilty on all 12 counts, she could face 24 years in prison and fines totaling up to as much as $48,000. That is a serious penalty. Secondly, we looked at the charge and the facts of the case here. And in this report, we look at numerous cases from other states and how those were dealt with. And I think what you'll find is that this is not only the harshest penalty that's contemplated and was contemplated in any of these cases, but that this is also different in that the usual case of petition fraud, and you'll see this in the report over and over again, is a petitioner either to make more money or a sponsor of a ballot measure or a candidate or people working for that candidate, in essence, forging signatures, writing names of voters on their petition who had no intention of signing that petition. And that is cheating in a sense, and it's an attempt to cheat state officials and somehow trick them into allowing a candidate or a measure to be on the ballot. In this particular case with Dr. Bosworth's campaign, it seems clear that enough signatures had been gathered that the signatures in question were not the difference. Now, whether that campaign understood that they had plenty of signatures or didn't understand it, that I do not know. But it also is different in a fairly substantial way, in that everyone who signed that petition, at least all the signatures that are part of this controversy, were people who no one disputes wanted to sign the petition, did sign the petition voluntarily. So it's not a matter of trying to cheat the state and have people who you claim support your effort to get on the ballot who don't, but people who actually do support that effort to get on the ballot. The I think final thing in this case, which makes it different than the other cases that you will read about in this report, and of course this report doesn't deal with every single case throughout the country, but I think you'll see in all the other cases that you might find, is that this case involves a doctor and an attorney general who have apparently been at loggerheads for years through one controversy after another controversy. And again, I'm not an expert on those controversies. Maybe some of you are, but I don't think you have to reach conclusions about who's right or wrong in any of these particular controversies to have some very serious concerns that when someone is prosecuted with very serious penalties, and it is part of a multi-year feud, that is troublesome. That suggests, whether it's true or not true, it suggests, at least in a lot of people's minds, and it certainly leads to questions, I would think, in everybody's mind, is there something behind this prosecution other than upholding the petition law? Is this part of a political vendetta? Is it part of a personal feud? Those are serious questions, and they ought not to get in the way of upholding the laws of the state. And so, having looked at these various issues, the conclusion that I, as the author of this report, have come to is that it is a mistake to have this prosecution. It is not that I would argue, or that my organization argues, that if wrongdoing happens in the petition process, it shouldn't be prosecuted. It should. People should be held to account. But the idea of punishments that are so draconian that someone who's seeking public office is possibly going to be in prison for decades, is going to have tens of thousands of dollars in fines, that is problematic. And it's not just problematic because of someone who faces that terrible penalty. It's not a matter of feeling sorry for someone who's in trouble. It's a matter of thinking, what is the impact of this on the rest of the state? What is the impact of this prosecution on the woman or the man who is today thinking about, maybe I want to run for public office, or maybe I want to help my friend run for public office and I'll collect some signatures? Well, I think this prosecution sends an absolutely chilling message to anyone thinking about getting involved in the political process that maybe I ought not. Maybe I ought not run for office. Maybe I ought not get involved in that political campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the opposite of the message that ought to be sent to the people of South Dakota. Now, what penalties various laws have in the state, that's for the legislature to decide. But what is for the Attorney General to decide is when you prosecute, how you prosecute, how many counts you bring, what sort of charge you bring, whether you negotiate to try to make sure that the message being sent to the public is, one, we want laws enforced and we want laws obeyed. But two, we never want to send a message to the public that it is dangerous to get involved in politics. And that is why I'm here today. That's why Citizens in Charge has decided to speak out on this case, because we think it sends the absolute wrong message. So I call on the Attorney General, look at this case again and do whatever you can do to pull back this prosecution. I'm not asking you to somehow let Dr. Bosworth go. That's not up to me to suggest what you do with it, but it is up to me as someone who cares about this process. all over the country, to not allow it to become a process that people are scared of, that is the worst of all worlds. And so I call on Attorney General Jack Lee, take another look at this case, recognize that the message being sent to the people of South Dakota, which is more important to me, and it ought to be, I think, to you, than this particular case, that is a bad message today. Let's change that message. So the message is, get involved. And if you make a mistake, sure, you'll be held to account, but not in some sort of draconian way that's going to be destructive to the kind of free and open election process that we all ought to be supportive of.